This is all about Bitcoin, a show dedicated to all things questions and markets related to Bitcoin, little b for the currency, and Bitcoin, big B for the network. A collective journey to understand, apply, and use this innovation, all Bitcoin, all the time. I'm your host, Christine Lee. Let's take a look at Bitcoin surging across that $50,000 threshold, trading at $50,777. Bitcoin is up about almost 3% over the past 24 hours. The most reliable reference prices for institutions since 2014 are now published under the CoinDesk brand, trusted globally as a leader in crypto news, events, and data. Let's take a look at some of our top stories. Bitcoin, of course, the largest cryptocurrency by market value, breaking above that crucial psychological threshold of $50,000 for the first time since September 7th. Quantum economics telling CoinDesk, quote, "It's too early to say whether this will turn into a new support level in the short term, but it is clear that the overriding market view is bullish." Awanda adding that given the difficult environment across all other asset classes, Bitcoin's long-term holders are the backbone in this recent rally. And shares of cryptocurrency miners, Marathon Digital Holdings and Hut 8 mining also popping amid Bitcoin's surge. A key gauge of Bitcoin mining activity, the hash rate, has recovered from a steep plunge in early July when China began a sweeping crackdown on the crypto industry. The hash rate recovery has added to the positive investor sentiment for the miners. And finally, U.S. Representative Patrick McHenry, the top Republican on the House Financial Services Committee, is urging the SEC to provide clarity and consistency in its plans for crypto regulation. In a letter to SEC Chair Gary Gensler Tuesday, Henry calling Gensler's public statements on the SEC's role in regulating crypto exchanges and stablecoins, quote, "concerning and apparently self-contradicting." The letter comes hours in advance of the committee's oversight hearing of the SEC, during which several committee members are expected to ask Gensler about crypto regulation. And joining us now to discuss Bitcoin and more is Travis Kling, founder and CIO of Ikigai Asset Management. Hey there, Travis, always a pleasure to see you. All right, so first off, I'd love to get your insights onto what we're seeing in Bitcoin, this latest bounce.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Christine. Look, it was pretty apparent that the moment Q3 was over and we started, a new month and entered into Q4, that we had significant inflows from various different market participants, because we just took off like a rocket ship as soon as the month and the quarter ended. The main driver for that, I think seems to be excitement around a CME futures Bitcoin ETF potentially getting approved. This is something that's been on folks' radar since the first week of August, when Gary Gensler came out with some of his first kind of official public comments and mentioned that he was thinking about treating 40 Act ETFs, which hold Bitcoin CME futures, differently than the approval process for spot physical ETFs. And in the 2 days following those public remarks, you had a couple different ETF providers come out with 40 Act CME futures Bitcoin products. And, I think the conjecture around the likelihood of those getting approved has kind of ramped up over the course of August and the course of September. And now we've gotten to the point where this is being kind of talked about everywhere. And there's still kind of a range of opinions, I think, about whether or not folks believe that it will get approved. But I think if you just take Gensler's comments at face value, there's certainly a good chance that they will get approved, and people see that as a potential kind of large new avenue for significant amounts of institutional capital to easily flow into Bitcoin, and that's got Bitcoin kind of heading in the right direction over the last handful of days here.
Travis, it's interesting you say that, because I also took a look at the GBTC premium. It's trading at a discount. It's been for a while, and we see that potentially because of this anticipation of this ETF in the United States, institutions are waiting to gain exposure in down ETFs. Taking a look at that chart, you sent us a one-year chart. Perhaps you can explain to us, walk us through what patterns you're seeing here.
Yeah, sure. So I think the point I was trying to make here was that towards the end of September, we did have, some technical damage that occurred to the Bitcoin chart, just purely from a TA perspective, which just reminding folks that TA is, definitely not the end all be all. It's just one aspect of a very multifaceted market with Bitcoin and crypto broadly. But then just in a handful of days here, you got back up over the 200-day moving average, which is in yellow. You got back through that downward resistance line, back through that kind of point of control block right underneath us right now. And you're now coming up on a point of control immediately overhead here. And, should that kind of low 50s, call it 53K-ish, should we kind of trade and close above that? It's going to look like a lot of green grass between there and testing all-time highs. But when you think about a chart that did a down 52% from the prior all-time high, a multi-month consolidation period, and then expansion after that consolidation, generally to go back and retest an all-time high after that amount of time and that amount of sort of like battling that happened over the prior 6 months here, I'm not entirely sure that prior all-time high is going to serve as too much resistance should we get back up there again.
Okay, so what are we, oversold, overbought? Where do you see the next leg, up or down?
Yeah, look, I mean, I try and be pretty careful about talking, too much about price specifics in public like this. But, I think that there should be some amount of resistance kind of immediately overhead here. And I think it shouldn't cause too much of a pullback in advance of the ETF decision, which the first one of those will be on October the 19th. Yes. So I wouldn't expect us to have too much weakness in between now and then.
A lot of anticipation on that.
Exactly. And should that get approved, I think that's going to open up the door for a retest and pretty good chance at an all-time high. Should it get denied? I think that'll be in the short term some kind of pullback.
I also took a look at your Twitter, and it's the first time, it's pretty rare for me to see you agreeing with Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, and she was saying on the Senate floor and casting some serious criticism over the integrity of the Federal Reserve, specifically Fed Chair Jerome Powell. And so we have this tweet. Clearly, there's a political fight brewing over the Fed, which makes sense as the entity has become entirely politicized. Kaplan Rosengren already out. Clarida, Powell on the ropes. Whether all these folks get replaced, their successors will definitely be more dovish than they are. All right, so maybe you could walk us through. Obviously, Senator Elizabeth Warren has been criticizing the Fed, and you seem to agree that there may be some political politics at work here.
Yeah, well, I mean, even a broken clock is wrong twice a day. I mean, Elizabeth Warren's a clown show, but in this particular example, I think I just am watching with a lot of interest about what's going on here. And this situation with the Fed right now is part of, over the last month or so, an ongoing series of macro situations that have caused an amount of stress in traditional markets that has leaked over into crypto to some degree. It started a month ago with Evergrande, and then Evergrande, those fears kind of got alleviated, and then it kind of morphed into debt ceiling fears. People started worrying about that. I think that's probably going to be fine. I would be shocked if that causes any kind of significant hiccup in traditional markets. I think politicians just know how bad of a look that is for both sides of the aisle. And then as of 2 weeks ago, with the Fed's meeting and them talking about tapering, and there's some amount of fear about the beginning of tapering potentially in November, although that's not set in stone yet. And then now this latest deal is potential sort of uncertainty and the volatility that could come from uncertainty as a result of some of the chairs potentially getting shuffled at the Fed. So Kaplan and Rosengren are out. Clarita is potentially on the ropes here. Powell is potentially on the ropes here as well too. And it's obvious that this situation is getting very, very politicized. And I understand how the Fed is the single most important entity on planet Earth to financial markets. And so to the extent that there's uncertainty there, it makes sense why that would potentially cause volatility. But over any kind of medium-term time frame, the point that I was making there is that whether some or all of these folks end up getting replaced, they will be replaced by folks that are more dovish than they are. And over any kind of medium, longer-term time frame, that's broadly very bullish for risk assets in general.
All right, Travis, great to have you on the show as always. And check out his Twitter account. It's always a fun read. That was Travis Kling, founder and CIO of Ikigai Asset Management. All right, coming up, chart of the day and more Bitcoin analysis.
CoinDesk Indexes, the market standard for crypto assets since 2014. The CoinDesk DeFi Index is our latest product and provides insight and exposure into decentralized finance. Our indexes are key for investors looking to access and understand crypto markets.
The CoinDesk DeFi Index is the best tool for a diversified approach to this compelling new category of digital assets.
The CoinDesk DeFi Index, measuring the investable DeFi market.
The chart of the day is brought to you by Crypto.com, the world's fastest growing crypto app.
Bitcoin gaining 25% in the third quarter of 2021. Two main themes dominated the months of July through September. Bitcoin's ability to shrug off legal crackdowns and political pressure from China after initially giving up hash rate or computing power, and its capacity for expanding through the Lightning Network as its use case was tested in El Salvador. This chart showing Bitcoin's monthly gains and losses in the third quarter since 2015. September's poor price performance aligns with an interesting trend for the Bitcoin market. Since 2017, BTC's price has declined, sometimes significantly, in September, and that trend continued last month. While there is no consensus reasoning behind the price movement pattern beyond cyclicality, there is an interesting parallel to draw to the S&P 500, which has averaged a 0.7% return in September, dating back to 1980. You can read more from the CoinDesk quarterly review by the CoinDesk research team. All right, joining us now to discuss is Matthew Gould, CEO of blockchain domain name provider Unstoppable Domains. Hey there, Matthew. So do you read into anything into the trend of September doldrums? What's your outlook on Bitcoin?
Oh, well, I'm still very bullish medium term from the lows we set this summer. And I think that long term Bitcoin looks range bound between the lows it previously set this summer and the all-time highs earlier this year. So short term, it looks like the bulls want to push towards the all-time highs, but we'll need to see a lot of follow through to make it there. Yeah, will we ever see 20,000 K again, or do you think it's what's your end of year to 22 projection? I think it would be very unlikely that we see 20,000 again, and that's why I think it's a really good time for people who are in this space longer term to take some bets here. On the downside, it's going to be tough to see us breaking to new lows, whereas we are flirting with pushing back towards the all-time highs. And if you look at the cryptocurrency industry on longer time horizons, when we do have these breakouts above the all-time highs, they're usually significant. So for those with a bit of patience, I actually think this is a good time to start waiting in the market and doing some TCA. 22 projection? Hard to say. Nobody has a crystal ball, but I do think we'll be higher than our previous all-time highs sometime in 2022, just based on the amount of usage that we're seeing across the space. We're seeing adoption by large companies like Twitter, for instance, who have recently shown interest in integrating crypto payments into their social platform, and they have hundreds of millions of users. And we're also breaking new all-time highs for wallets for things in the NFT space. As well as several different new use cases like the verified profile photos for Twitter that got leaked earlier this week. Mm-hmm. There's also an argument for more decentralization amid Facebook's shutdown. And
Perhaps you want to go into that with we saw with Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp going down. There seemed to be a call from the Bitcoin community that this means that, this is another reason why Web3 needs to happen now.
Yeah, one company goes down and then you can't use any of your social networks, like that's a problem. And what we saw here is you had no way to take your data with you. So when Facebook and Instagram and all of their services went down, if you needed to reach someone on that platform, maybe you wanted to reach out to your mom, right? And you normally communicate on Facebook, and now all of a sudden you can't do that because you can't take your data with you. You're not allowed to own that data, and Facebook has that. But if we move towards a Web3 model, if a service like Facebook goes down, you could simply take the information that you have about yourself and plug into a competitor website, and then you would still be able to contact the people you're trying to get a hold of and carry on as normal. It's going to create a lot more competition for these networks. I think everyone agrees that we need more competition in social network space, and it's going to come from the cryptocurrency industry. We're the people who are going to bring the technology to make that a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, there have been several decentralized social media platforms that have arrived. I haven't seen the right one yet, but it will be interesting to see how that comes about with decentralizing social media. All right, Matt, we got to end it there, but thanks for joining us. Appreciate your insights. That was the CEO of Unstoppable Domains, Matthew Gould. That's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Christine Lee. Join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in New York for First Mover, your first look at the day's global crypto news headlines. You're watching CoinDesk TV.